SpongeBob SquarePants is weird. We all know that. Talking fish, underwater campfires, Bubble Buddy, the show's built on nonsense. But then there's SB-129, the episode that confused everyone when it first came out. An episode so surreal, so glitched, so out of place, fans still can't agree on what it even means. Some say it's a time travel episode gone wrong. Others think it's a metaphor for nihilism. And yeah, there's even a theory that Squidward dies midway through the episode. But what if none of those theories tell the whole story? Because the more I rewatched it, the more I realized something. This episode does make sense, you just have to know where to look. So I went back, watched every frame, and when I started lining up the details with some forgotten episodes and overlooked science, I found something no one was talking about. Because once you connect all the dots, it all makes sense. A theory that doesn't just explain the episode, it explains why Squidward is the way he is. We have to go all the way back. Not just to the future, but to where it all started. The episode opens up with Squidward getting interrupted from his morning clarinet routine, because SpongeBob and Patrick won't let him be, as usual. So desperate for silence, Squidward runs off to the Krusty Krab, sneaks into the walk-in freezer, and slams the door shut.
Squidward! Well, he's not here. I'll bet that eager beaver's already down at Jellyfish Field.
That's how Squidward ends up frozen for 2,000 years. But here's the weird part. Why hasn't anyone opened this freezer in 2 millennia? Has no one ever restocked anything at the Krusty Krab? And even if they don't, Squidward's face is literally frozen in the door's window. Someone must have noticed it. But nope, Squidward wakes up in the year 4017. Bikini Bottom is changed, and everything's chrome. And the first creature he met is Spongetron, a robotic SpongeBob with rocket legs and 486 other versions of himself. You see, that detail always felt weird to me. This future has kept SpongeBob for centuries. Like, he became something worth preserving. Squidward naturally panicked and asked to get back home right away. Spongetron points him towards a time machine at the end of the hallway because, apparently, time travel just exists now? Like, next to the can opener room. Okay, and Squidward, still panicking, jumps in without hesitation. This is where the adventure begins. First, he tries to go to the past and overshoots, ends up in prehistoric Bikini Bottom, where cavemen versions of SpongeBob and Patrick greet him. This is the second weird thing. Squidward catches a jellyfish in frustration, and they copy him. Just like that, jellyfishing is born. Is Squidward the founder of jellyfishing? Which is ironic, since we all know Squidward really hates jellyfishing in the future. This is a canon event, but unfortunately, prehistoric Patrick and SpongeBob are not fans of his clarinet solo. They go feral and chase him down, and in the panic, Squidward breaks the time machine's lever and... boom! He's not in the past, he's not in the future, he's nowhere. A blank white void, no water, no sound except echoing versions of his own voice bouncing back at him. He liked it at first because he could finally be alone. 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 But the longer he stays, the more his voice glitches. His words double up, his mind spirals. His isolation gets amplified, and the only thing he wants, after all this time, is to go home. After a few good stomps, he finds the time machine again, he screams for the machine to listen, and it does. It takes him back. The machine listens, without any lever or instructions, just because he asked. Which is strange, right? It just works, like it knows it has to close the loop. And then we get one more final moment. Squidward steps out of the time machine, back to Conch Street, back to normal. Then comes the final punch, with Patrick and SpongeBob asking him to go jellyfishing again, and this...
Who's the barnacle head who invented that game anyway?
You are, Squidward!
Which is terrifying, because how do they know? Do prehistoric memories echo forward? Did they inherit it? Or has the loop already restarted and no one remembers the first version except him? On the surface, SB-129 looks like just another goofy SpongeBob time travel episode. Squidward jumps too far into the future, too far into the past, gets stuck in a void, and then somehow comes back home. Simple enough. Except it's not. Because once you actually line up what's happening, too many details don't add up, too many moments feel wrong. Like something about this timeline broke and no one ever fixed it. So I went deep, and what I found wasn't just an explanation. It might just be the real reason Squidward is the way he is. But to get there, we need to unpack this mystery piece by piece. So we're breaking it into 3 parts. For the first part, we have to explain the paradox of 2 Squidwards. The first weird thing is Squidward gets frozen in the Krusty Krab for 2,000 years. Then, after his time-hopping meltdown, he returns to the present.
SpongeBob, Patrick!
But here's the issue. We never saw present Squidward unfreeze himself from the freezer, or anything happen to him. Because unless the timeline erased itself, which it didn't, that frozen Squidward should still be there. Which means there are now 2 versions of him in the same timeline. One who's been through a metaphysical journey across time and space, and one who's still just sitting in a freezer, completely unaware. That's a paradox. And this show almost never plays with that kind of timeline logic, which is part of why this episode always felt so off. It was only later in Season 7 they brought up another time travel episode, Back to the Past. The episode where SpongeBob and Patrick go into early Bikini Bottom, using a time travel machine from Mermaid Man's secret laboratorium. This episode indicates that it is possible in Bikini Bottom to have 2 different timeline characters at one place. It is also possible for them to change the course of history because in the episode, they do change history. Patrick eats all the tartar sauce, which prevents Mermaid Man from ever capturing Man Ray, and Man Ray later dominates the whole world in the present day. This also means the first episode of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy from Season 1 never happens, because Man Ray never gets frozen in the tartar sauce. This detail actually explains why Squidward never gets defroze in SB-129. You see, when future Squidward returns at the end of the episode, they do realize that there is another Squidward frozen in the Krusty Krab's freezer, even Squidward himself, but they intentionally never thought it, because doing that would break the timeline he accidentally created, one where jellyfishing exists. Yeah, we're going there. Jellyfishing exists because Squidward brought it to the past even though he only learned it from the future. Which means, and yes, this is canon, Squidward invented jellyfishing. That's a bootstrap paradox, a time loop with no beginning. And that's the poetic horror of it. He tried to run from the things he hated most, only to realize he was the one who started them. So they let him freeze there for 2,000 years, let history stay intact, even if it means freezing a version of him in time forever. But that still doesn't explain the weirdest moment in the future. Because after 2,000 years, when Squidward wakes up, Spongetron looks at him and says,
I am Spongetron. Welcome to the future.
Like he was expecting him. By now we've established 2 things. 1, time travel is real in Bikini Bottom. And 2, the timeline remembers. And if the future SpongeBob descendants know Squidward was coming, that raises a new question. Did they pass along the words to their descendants? And that brings us to the second part of the theory. Not about Squidward, but about the immortals who never left. Let's get scientific for a second. Sea sponges can live up to thousands of years in the deep ocean. One of the big reasons is that they're what scientists call clonal species, organisms that continually regenerate. Some parts die off, others grow back. It's not exactly immortality, but it's close. And it gets even better, or weirder in this case. They thrive in cold environments, grow slowly, and don't burn through energy fast, which is what the bottom of the sea is. It means SpongeBob didn't just survive 2,000 years in the sea, he evolved too. This theory is also backed up in episode Pressure. SpongeBob casually mentions he can reproduce by budding, which is not a joke. It's a real thing sponges do. But what about Patrick? Starfish like Patrick, they can regrow limbs, and in some species a whole new body. He also mentions this in episode Karate Star. This also explains why Patrick has 2 heads in the future. So by the time we get to the future in SB-129, those SpongeBob and Patrick aren't descendants, they're clones. Versions of SpongeBob and Patrick who have been replicating themselves for thousands of years, possibly with the same consciousness, passed along each time. Which raises an even bigger question. If SpongeBob and Patrick can live forever, regenerating and reliving, are they even aware they're clones anymore? Have they passed along some kind of collective memory? Or are they just performing the loop because it's all they've ever known? Because here's what that means for SB-129. Squidward wakes up after 2,000 years, dazed and confused, but Spongetron? He's calm, fully sentient, and when Squidward asks to go home, Spongetron doesn't even question it. Like he's seen this before. Like he's been expecting this moment. That event isn't random, because he was indeed expecting it. Because they've lived it over and over and over again. It could also explain why Patrick shows up in perfect timing, because he knows Squidward will be there. That's the actual timeline for this episode. But that still leaves one last mystery. We still need to explain the nowhere place, what actually happens in the time machine. Because if time and identity are already shifting around Squidward, then what actually happens when he breaks the machine? Where does he go? That's the last piece of this puzzle. This is the last section of our theory, and it will put the two previous theories together, and it will blow your minds because it makes sense of everything. You see, after Squidward breaks the time machine, he doesn't land in a prehistoric jungle or some dystopian future. He lands in nothing. A blank, white space with no direction, time, or sound, except his own echo. And despite the soft colors, the minimalism, the quiet, this might be the darkest place in the entire series. This void could be a purgatory, or worse, a limbo. And I'm not just throwing around spooky words here, the signs are all over this sequence. Start with the most obvious detail. There's no water. Not even background bubbles. Not even the sound of the ocean floor. Which is insane because SpongeBob almost never drops the underwater illusion. This is the only time the ocean rules are completely gone. The place is totally empty, matching how spiritual limbo is often described. The second evidence that I noticed about this scene was how the voices seem to haunt Squidward, especially at the alone monologue part. The void is repeating him, mocking him, or maybe it's not his voice at all anymore, just echoes of other souls. And then there's those floating color fragments, weird glitching shapes with no explanation. They're not errors. They're shattered pieces of memory, fragments of the Bikini Bottom timeline that broke when Squidward snapped the machine. This is what Limbo looks like in SpongeBob's universe, a place where deleted scenes, abandoned realities, and broken characters drift without meaning. This is where the loop ends, and you don't. But the true tragedy lies in the way Squidward gets there. Before he arrives in the void, the time machine doesn't just malfunction, it glitches out completely, spinning wildly, folding in on itself, cycling through colors, and then it disappears in a burst of white light. You could interpret this as Squidward dying. There is no way Squidward could have survived being flattened to almost subatomic size and an explosion of white energy. So, if we assume the time machine completely collapsed in on itself, what we're watching now isn't Squidward's body, it's Squidward's mind, or maybe even his soul. And if Squidward just stayed in this realm, he would be placed in a state of suffering. Being out of the seawater would have probably suffocated him. And haunted by the voice of the lost souls in this case. Poor Squiddy just wants to be free of SpongeBob, Patrick, jellyfishing, all of it. And he got it, technically. But in that moment, surrounded by nothing, he realizes the scariest truth of all. Without all those things, there's nothing left of him. And that's when it hits. He screams to no one. And the machine responds. But here's where it gets even stranger. The machine doesn't need a lever anymore. It doesn't need a destination, it just listens and obeys. Like it wasn't mechanical to begin with. Like it's a force, a cycle, a system designed to reset Squidward once he's broken. It brings him back to Conch Street. So let's put it all together. Squidward didn't just stumble into the future, he created it. He jumped into a machine meant to reset time, and by doing so, he bootstrapped a future that only exists because he ran from the present. He's the accidental founder of jellyfishing.
It's called jellyfishing.
The silent spark that lit a 2,000-year cycle, and the only one who ever noticed it happened. SpongeBob and Patrick? They're not just eternal. They're clones of themselves, carrying on a loop that Squidward's actions started. A loop they've preserved, maintained, repeated, without ever questioning it. And when Squidward tries to escape the loop by breaking the machine, by stepping outside of time, he breaks himself instead. Because what he finds in that void isn't freedom, it's the absence of identity. You think this episode was about Squidward being annoyed? Nah, it's a story about identity collapse. About what happens when you reject the part you've been assigned, and find that nothing else is waiting for you. One Squidward is still frozen in the freezer, untouched, forgotten, and quietly holding the loop in place. Another just returned from oblivion, fractured, haunted, changed.
You don't know how happy I am to see you guys.
Both exist and are trapped in a cycle that never breaks. You can try to reboot your life, you can jump timelines, but eventually the loop will find you again. Because ironically, the world you hate was the only one you knew existed. So, if SpongeBob and Patrick are eternal, and Squidward is the only one who changes, then Squidward, the one who remembers, is the only one who ever suffers. Because he knows there's no escape. So yeah, SB-129 might be one of the most misunderstood episodes in the show. Not only is this episode hiding something so canon, the episode could also explain why Squidward is grumpy in the first place. Because he knows he's stuck with his neighbors, no matter the timeline. But if you thought this was SpongeBob's strangest episode, wait till you see what they tried to bury in plain sight. There's another episode, one so dark, so disturbing, some fans believe it was never meant to air at all. And we finally broke it down. In our last video, we solved the mystery behind what might be SpongeBob's darkest episode ever. Trust me, the scariest parts are the ones no one notices.
Item has been temporarily moved during reconstruction. Relocated to shelf